What are sulfites? Are they a big deal? Are they bad? My name is Ashwin Mathia. I am a sommelier, a nice one, an author and a documentary host. In this video, we're going to debunk sulfites and answer all the questions you might have about them. We go to visit this winery, Podere Capaccia, where a really close friend, Aly Morgan, is the head winemaker. She studied enology and viticultural science at UC Davis, which is one of the leading institutions to study anything wine related. And she's been living in Tuscany making wine for over 25 years. She also happens to be a really close friend and lives about 10 minutes that way. We headed out about an hour south of Florence into the Tuscan hills near Radda in Chianti Classico, to put all of these rumors around sulfites to rest from an expert in Aly. So if you're ready, here we go. All right, we're headed to Radda in Chianti, which is one of the handful of villages that is well known in Chianti Classico. And we're going to see Podere Capaccia. So Aly's the winemaker there. She's a good friend of ours. Hey, what's up?
So good to see you.
Long time no see.
No. It's so good to have you.
Great to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Here we go.
Thank you.
So Ashwin, what are we talking about today?
I think the goal is to help the world understand everything about sulfites, given that it's a big topic, a lot of confusion. I'll admit, I get confused about it, so really excited to have your expert opinion on what they are, what they do. Are they bad? Are they good? I'm sure the answer is somewhere in the middle.
In the middle, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. So sulfites are added to the wine as an antioxidant.
Okay.
The goal for a sulfite is to eat oxygen, to think of it that way. So there are times when you add it, it's also naturally occurring in the fermentation, but not at a level to help protect the wine from being oxidized by the oxygen. Okay. So what you do is anytime wine is in contact with oxygen, you add some sulfites. We add it in a form called metabisulfite, which is a powder form that you add a little bit of water so it dissolves, and then you just put it directly into the wine itself.
Okay.
So we were talking about sulfites, and I was just going to show you what it actually means when we add them. So this is a bag. It's just called metabisulfite.
Okay.
You buy them at your local wine production
And it's
supplies.
not dangerous as a bag? Like
No. This is actually one that's been opened, so we will have to buy a new bag if we're adding it to wine, because we also use this for cleaning, cleaning the products with the water. So all you do is you take a container, you put some of the powder inside, and then you just add cold water and it dissolves. So you can see it's just this white powder.
Okay.
And just in the bottom.
Okay.
And then when you add the water,
And so for context,
just a little bit of water.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. And then see how it's already dissolved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that little bit that you added, like how many milligrams do you think that was?
Okay, so I would have to.
Or
You
what
have
do
to.
use to measure, like when you're
Oh,
measuring?
we have a scale, precise scale.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So these are 500 gram bags, I believe. And so yeah, we measure it on an electronic scale and then put it in and just add enough water to cause it to dissolve. Yeah. We're adding very small amounts. So we're talking 2 to 3 milligrams per hectoliter. And
So for the non-technical folks,
Yes.
like conceptually a milligram, like how much is a milligram?
Very minimal powder, just a little bit of powder that is dissolved. By the time our wine is going into the bottle, the SO2 level, total SO2 level, is around 70. So the way sulfites work is that when you add it into the wine, it's called free SO2. Okay. So that's the available SO2 to eat up all the oxygen.
Okay.
Then that free SO2 goes to the total SO2. So every milligram you add is being added to a total. The free SO2 bumps up to maybe 10 and then dwindles down to 0 as it eats up the oxygen.
I see.
But that 10 goes into the total. So you do have limits by law. I think the total is now about 150 is the total that you can have inside your wine. We never get to that. We're always around 70 because you're only bumping it, is what we call it, bumping it up at those certain times in production.
Got it.
So some people sort of say that in Italy, a lot of the wines that they're tasting here in Chianti Classico don't have that effect that people have, a negative effect. Sulfites, they say maybe they have more of a hangover, a headache. Might be true that wines in California have higher sulfites. I remember where I worked, we did have a higher total SO2, usually around 100, 120 maybe. So that could contribute. Red wines historically have lower SO2 levels because as an antioxidant, you need that in white wines, rosés, which can easily be oxidized and cause a problem with the visual aspect of a wine. We don't have that problem with reds.
And so basically, to just explain a little bit, when a wine oxidizes, it turns more brown.
Right. Exactly.
A white wine turning brown is a little bit obvious.
Yeah.
A red wine turning brown, you can't really see it that much. So
Yeah.
it's not a visual element. It's like purely like a wine preservation
Just protection.
element. And can you explain a little bit more this concept of free versus total? Like what happens, like so the free sulfites, how, like why do they disappear and then how are they still there in the total?
Yeah, you really notice it when you're working with the sulfites themselves. If you ever get your nose close to the chemical, you immediately feel like the oxygen's being pulled out of your body, like you can't breathe. And it's actually doing that. It is actually absorbing the oxygen. So
it's dangerous.
It is dangerous. We
have
eliminated a certain type of SO2 that you can add, which is like the liquid form, or it used to be in a gas form that you could actually directly put in and bubble the gas into the tank. But if you ever had a leak to that, it eats all the oxygen out of the air. So you have to be very careful. So the powder form is the easiest and most safe form of metabisulfite.
Got it. And so this concept of like free versus total, so you add some free sulfites, let's say when you're moving it from, you're pressing, so it's going to be exposed to oxygen. What happens to the free sulfite that it kind of like stops being effective? And then how is it still like part of this total amount that you've added?
Yeah, it's a bit hard to explain the chemical. I just like to think of it as more of a big picture.
Okay,
because
cool.
it's a little bit, yeah. So when you add those 3 milligrams, you can actually smell it when you add it. And then it's the same concept as when sometimes if you open a brand new bottle that's maybe just been bottled, you can smell a little bit of chemicaliness in the wine. And as you spin it, as it aerates, that dissipates. As all the free SO2, this is being used up by the oxygen. But you're not getting rid of that sulfite matter. It's not just dissolving into the air. It's still present as a chemical inside the wine.
I see.
So, and these are chemicals that are naturally occurring during the fermentation, like we said.
Yeah.
It's just you're adding it at a little bit of higher level.
Yeah. So if I'm understanding correctly, the concept is basically free sulfites are ones that are available to protect the wine. They're active. They'll eat the oxygen. At a certain point, they will have eaten as much oxygen as they can eat, and then they're no longer effective, but the residual level is still in the wine.
It's still in the wine.
That's the concept of total.
Exactly.
And so basically, whenever the wine is going to be exposed to oxygen, you want some amount of free sulfites so that the air that it's in contact with is not damaging the wine.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the last place where you add the sulfites are during bottling.
Okay.
And so you want to bottle wine so it has a free SO2 level up to around 15 to 20, let's say. And that's going to protect the wine for the rest of the life in the bottle. So it is going to gradually go down as the microoxygenation through the cork takes place. And so, as you know, wines as they get older in the bottle, they will start to get that brick red color. They lose sort of that violet, the purpley red, which sort of goes to more of a brick red, and that's the oxidization.
Got it. So as the free sulfites kind of stop being free, as they're chained and jailed, the wine will start to move more towards the colors we associate with like an aged red wine.
Right.
Got it.
Yeah. So I mean, there are people that just do natural wines that don't have any additional sulfites added, and that is, I mean, what you'll have is maybe the wines won't be able to be aged as long in the bottle. Maybe they'll, they just change. They evolve more quickly into that tertiary.
Right.
So you have sort of tertiary notes.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to why actually we experienced this when we were filming In Pursuit of Flavor, where there's a ton of natural wines in Georgia and you drink them there and they're phenomenal.
Right.
And then obviously because they're not well protected, when they travel, they don't do well.
They have a hard time, yeah, because you're getting jostled and the temperature changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By the time we got back to Atlanta and we were drinking these wines, we were like, oh, this is still good, but it's not the same.
Right.
And it's one of these things that's hard to explain to folks. And it's like natural wines are awesome, but they're also like pretty difficult to like drink in the way they're meant to be drank. Like, you got to go to the place
go to
where
the
they're
source,
made,
yes.
and they're great.
Right.
But other than that, it becomes a little bit more challenging for them, or just you need a lot of maintenance. It needs to be temperature controlled in lots being in transit. The next thing I wanted to ask you, and you've already alluded to this a little bit, but what in your mind is the difference between responsible use of sulfites versus irresponsible use of sulfites in winemaking?
Yes, I mean, it is one of those things that the wine will be protected. And so there might be a tendency, more is better. And so and it will be protected for longer, maybe. My concept is to do as little as possible to the wine, to let it stay nice and calm and mellow, move it as little as possible, open the barrels as little as possible, keep it so that it is not needing that extra protection. So I also don't do any clarifications. The filtration is very minimal, only at the time of bottling, because if you're doing filtrations maybe during the process before you plan to bottle, you'll need to add more sulfites then. And so I want to keep it as low as possible without compromising the health of the wine. Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you're producing white wines, there is a little bit more of a responsibility. You do have to and add other antioxidants like ascorbic acid or whatnot, just to keep it so that it's protected even on a visual level. But irresponsible use of sulfites would just be bumping up until you're clear near to the max level.
Yeah.
And so that might end up causing problems for people that are very sensitive to sulfites in the end.
Yeah.
And it might happen a lot of times with wineries that are making wines that need to be shipped long distances. That have to be, they're going to be a month on the sea and they have to get to, Canada or whatnot in the winter months so they'll need to protect the wines. And also there used to be countries that aren't wine producing countries that would require a certain level of free SO2 when it arrived.
Really?
Yes, I had worked with an importer back 25 years ago from Italy that required it to be about 25 when it arrived. And so we would have to make sure that the wine was at a level that when it would lose it during the trip.
Or something.
Right. And that was almost excessive in terms of our legal requirements here. You really can't go over, I think it's 30 now is the max, and that you can't exceed. So those are things, but that usually requires, if there's regulations where the wine is arriving, and then if it's going to be traveling a long time.
Is there, in your mind, a correlation between the larger the facility that's making, let's talk about, I don't want to name any names, but these big giant producers that you can go to a Kroger, you can go to wherever and find their wine. Is there a correlation in how much wine you're making and kind of how you're using sulfites, do you think?
It depends on the producer, but usually with the smaller producer you have, there's going to be less sort of a industrial type of production being used. But just from my neighbors, I have a neighbor that has 100 hectares, which is very large.
For comparison's sake, Aly has 3 hectares.
Exactly. And they're organic, and they work as if it were a whole bunch of small vineyards. And so they are not that commercial that you would see. Their wines will have really high sulfites on the shelf of a supermarket. So it depends on the winery.
Okay.
I mean, I can understand that some of the wineries, they have to protect their product.
Yeah.
And so they most likely will tend to have a higher sulfite level.
Yeah.
But that's, smaller you go, it might be more of an artisan style production like ourselves, where we try to keep it as close to the original and not manipulate or affect the quality of the wine.
Yeah, it sounds like in order to keep sulfite levels low, you need to be pretty deliberate throughout the whole process. Like you were saying earlier, that we try to intervene less, because every time you're going to intervene or do something, that probably means there's going to be oxygen exposure, and then which means you would need to add sulfites. So it seems like a base philosophy that you need to have in order to maintain this kind of production.
Exactly, because we're at the end of the day really only moving our wine about 5 times during its lifetime.
Wow.
Of the 2 years, it could be.
I'll take care of moving it the 6th time.
Exactly. Opening up the bottle.
I'll volunteer for that any day of the week. So one thing you had mentioned was that a lot of people associate sulfites with red wine, or when they, if they think they're sulfite sensitive, they try to avoid reds.
Right.
But it sounds like it's usually sulfites are used more in whites and rosés.
Yes. Yes, I usually say, if somebody says that they're really sensitive to wine, I usually say, well, red wine is probably the best wine that you could drink.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's scientifically proven that there are some people that are more sensitive, but I definitely know of personal friends that do find it more jarring. Get a headache. Headache is usually most associated, but that can also be associated with the CO2 level in the wine. So maybe the bubblies could affect that as well. But what a lot of people don't know is that there are sulfites in many food products. It is used as an antioxidant, not just in wine, but in like baked goods or dried apricots, or so it's never labeled how much is on. They'll just say contains sulfites. That's sort of like a overarching, it's in all the languages, but it does not tell you at what level.
So that makes it kind of confusing as the consumer, right? If you think you might be sulfite sensitive, which is also, maybe we start there, is that a thing, being sensitive to sulfites, or is it probably something else in the wine that could be causing the headaches or the light nausea?
It can be a combination, alcohol level too, as well. Alcohol, CO2, and sulfites, but sulfites, sometimes you can smell, like I can, right? Because when we're doing a bottling, and I'm always taking a bottle of wine off quality control. And those quality control required by law. I will take a bottle off, and you open it up, you pour it in a glass, and you will have that sensation of the sulfites that were just added, a half an hour prior. So and I can recognize that chemically smell. It dissipates very quickly. But some people, there might be super smellers, or people that are more sensitive in their, in olfactory to it. So I doubt that it is what is going to be causing your hangover and the headaches on the backside, because it is something that really dissipates immediately. So that might be more the CO2 and the alcohol.
Or sugars.
Or sugar. Oh, sugars, exactly. The residual sugars.
Basically dehydration.
Yes.
Do you have any guidance for people that feel like they might be sensitive to sulfites? What should they look for when it comes to choosing wine in general? So based on the usage of sulfites in the cantina, the wines that are newly bottled are going to have a higher free SO2 level. The white wines, like I said, rosés, bubblies, those might have a higher level to begin with. And since it is something that dissipates over time, you might want to try wines that are older, that have been bottled earlier. So you can always see on a bottle, there's always going to be a lot number based on when it was bottled, and they'll usually say the year that it was bottled. And so just get a wine that has been bottled for longer than 1 year. And help. Do you think, is there any issue? Does free sulfites versus total sulfites have an effect on kind of how you might feel, or is it really the free sulfites?
The free sulfites immediately, but I don't know the research on it, but I would imagine if somebody is sensitive to it, maybe the total sulfites, and it might even influence the flavor. You might be able to feel more of a metallic, but that needs more research. In the EU now, the laws are changing on the bottling and the labeling of wine. This hasn't come into effect yet, but most likely the wines that were fermented and produced in 2023 once they get bottled, will require an ingredient list. So this is going to be sort of revolutionize the whole market, and most likely everybody will have a QR code on the back of the label that will take you to a page, just a white page that has all the products that were added to the wine. And that includes from yeast to sulfites to any clarifications, because of also the allergens. Because in wine production, sometimes people use gelatin or egg whites, and that needs to be listed, even though it doesn't remain in the wine. They're all things that settle out that are used
anything
as
that touches the wine.
Anything that touches the wine is going to be required to be listed on the bottle. And since it's hard, that would be a very long list to put on. Everybody is moving towards this QR code that will have all the information. And at this point, I don't know if it's going to require actually the quantity.
Okay.
But that might be where the actual total SO2, the free SO2 might be listed on that.
Gotcha. And as a winemaker, how do you feel about this change?
Well, I think it'll be hard to explain at the beginning to the consumer, because a lot of people don't exactly know how the sausage is made, and they don't really know everything that happens in a winery. You know, I am probably pretty rare as I do not clarify my wine, because I do keep my wine in the cantina for many years before it even gets bottled, so it's already stable. You know, it's already gone through full moons and seasons, and it's, you know, settled out. So I'm not worried about things being in solution that need to be filtered out, you know. But most wineries do have to do some sort of clarification, and the public doesn't know that, and they might be a little bit off-put by thinking that there are egg whites inside their wine and say that, but I'm vegan. Things like that might be a little bit of an obstacle for wine in the future. I think it's sort of a test run with the EU, and luckily, I'm not looking to bottle my 2023 anytime soon, so there'll be guinea pigs ahead of me to know how it goes. We still don't have, the Consortium of Chianti Classico has not informed us of what and when we have to do it. So it's not set in stone yet. But it does look like that's where the future is going. Just as, you know, the nutritional information has been added to olive oil, for example, which previously wasn't required.
Cool. I actually didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Did your perception about sulfites ever change throughout the course of your winemaking career? Because you've been making wine for some time now.
Yes. So I could say got into wine. My dad made wine from the year I was born. So it was, and we're talking natural wine, because I grew up in Northern California and there are no grapes on the coast. So my dad would go inland and get the must, and we would ferment and produce wine in our cellar. So I was always around barrels and bottling. And my dad had a very popular wine because he did not add sulfites. So any sulfites that were in there had naturally occurred during fermentation. And there were a lot of, this is a very hippie community. And so people were very resistant to the idea of, you know, chemicals and additions to wine. So I grew up always having, you know, my dad's wine around, and there were some years it came out fine. There were some years that, you know, the oxidation did run its course, and maybe the wine was closer to vinegar than it was to wine. So that was the risk you ran. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. So then when I went to university, you know, you study all the requirements to protect your wine, and it was from a California concept. And when I worked there, I don't know if things have changed. It's been 25 years since I've made wine in California, but there was more of a tendency to, I think, add more sulfites. Then when I got here to Italy, I have worked at various sized wineries. And for the past 20 years, I've been personally responsible for the actual additions of the wine. They've been small wineries, and so I'm able to limit the sulfites because I can't, I'm a bit sensitive to them, and I do want my wines to be able to be enjoyed very soon after bottling, you know, especially with Chianti Classico, which doesn't need to be, you know, in the bottle for a long period of time. So, you know, my personal beliefs are, yes, it's required to protect your wine, but I do not want to overuse it and compromise the aromas that are in the wine, because there are some volatiles like the floral notes that we have in Sangiovese that are very delicate and they're very unstable. So they're the first ones to blow off, as we say, the most volatile. And so if you're sort of waiting for your free SO2 to blow off, you're also going to be losing all those first floral notes. And so then you're just going to be really noticing
you take
fruit.
a multi-dimensional wine and make it like, like 3 dimensions become 2, and then it just...
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so to recap what we learned about sulfites, and I was learning on the fly here too, so please correct me if I'm messing this up. But what we learned is that, one, it's naturally occurring, and it's not naturally occurring in a quantity high enough to protect the wine, but it does happen on its own during fermentation. You add sulfites at any point the wine is going to be in contact with oxygen. So right after the harvest or before you bottle, when the wine is going to be kind of out in the open, you add sulfites so that you can protect the wine. There's a concept of free sulfites and total sulfites. Free sulfites are the sulfites that are available to eat the oxygen that is the wine is being exposed to, but there's a certain amount of oxygen that the sulfites can eat before they've kind of become disactivated, if that's, I don't know if that's a technical term. And at that point, they're no longer protecting the wine, but they do still remain as a chemical byproduct in the wine, where that's kind of this concept of total sulfites. And you're trying to manage both free sulfites so that there's enough to protect the wine and make sure the total sulfite level doesn't get too high. And I think there's still some general questions and doubt around whether sulfites are really the ones that are causing the headaches when you're drinking the wine, especially given that often people will claim, oh, I get red wine headaches because of sulfites. And for the most part, we're learning that it's more likely you'll have higher sulfites in white wines and rosés than you would in reds. So it might be something else that's going on in the red that could be causing those sensitivities. Is that a reasonable recap?
That's a wonderful recap.
Yeah?
Yes.
All right. I guess I get an A.
Yeah.
Cool.